Marco Rubio faced off with Congresswoman Val Demings in the Florida Senatorial debate, and it was definitely a fascinating debate to watch. Val Demings had some crushing moments where she really made some incredible points in a very rhetorically effective manner. I will say, different than some of these other Republicans we've seen on these debate stages, I think Marco Rubio stood up strong enough and was effective enough that this won't hurt his campaign, but it might give a boost just in the awareness of Val Demings and the campaign she's running. And of course, my personal stance is that she would be a much better senator than Marco Rubio. But we're going to take a look at a few moments here. And again, very interesting stuff. The first is the moderator asks Marco Rubio, of course, the current incumbent Republican senator, about the fact that he kind of has flopped on an issue, or flip-flopped around the regulation of bringing down the age that people are allowed to get certain firearms. And previously, he had what I would consider to be a more reasonable stance, and now it's gotten less reasonable. So take a look at this.
All use legally purchased AR-style rifles. In the nationally televised CNN town hall 3 days after the Parkland massacre, you said, quote, "If you are 18 years of age, you should not be able to buy a rifle. I will support a law that takes that right away." Would you still support that federal law?
Now, let me tell you why that law doesn't work and why that proposal doesn't work. We had a shooter last Thursday, tragic, in North Carolina. He was 15. Where did he get the gun? He didn't get it from a gun show. He certainly didn't buy it. He's 15 years of age. We've had shootings in the state. Pulse was a terrorist attack. A licensed security guard with a permit to carry firearms, extensive background check. The guy in Parkland, this killer, everybody knew who it was. Even before they announced who the person was, everybody in the community knew who it was, because this guy had long problems. He'd been acting up for a long time and everybody knew it. And here's what happened. The sheriff did nothing about it. The school district did nothing about it because they didn't want to arrest kids. And
so I play this moment because it's a very great example of something we see Republicans do a lot. And it's this intellectual trick, I guess, but it really shouldn't be, because everyone should see how dishonest it is, in which they say if something doesn't solve the entire problem, there's no worth in even going down that path, or there's no purpose of even trying out or attempting to use that proposal, that solution. And so we saw this a lot with vaccines, where they would say, hey, this one person or this batch of people got the vaccine and still got COVID or still got sick from it. So that's why we should not vaccinate anyone. And then we would try to explain the concept to people that, listen, there's probability. It's a thing, okay? So what we're looking at here is vaccines, no, don't protect everyone from getting sick, but it would decrease your likelihood of getting a very severe illness. Do you understand? It's not that you won't 100% get a severe illness, but you will have a less likelihood of that happening. And it was weird to see people not really understand the concept. Similar thing here. He goes, listen, the reason why I don't want to support bringing the age down to 18 is because here's an example of a guy who was 15 who shot at people. Yeah, okay, but there's lots of examples that that law would have prevented the shooter from getting their hands on a weapon. So it's just very strange how they almost play dumb to defend their not logical stances on these types of things. Next, Demings has a moment again talking about gun control and gun violence.
I want to make sure that you don't support that anymore. It is an important point.
Denying the right to buy it is not going to keep them from doing it. Here's the fundamental issue. The fundamental issue is, why are these kids, why are these people going out there and massacring people?
This is the same,
because a lot of people own AR-15s and they don't kill everyone.
I understand, sir, but I want to go to Congresswoman Demings for 60 seconds.
You know, people who are the families of victims of gun violence just heard that, and they're asking themselves, what in the hell did he just say? Senator, you used the Pulse nightclub shooting as your inspiration to run again for the Senate in 2016. Pulse is in my district. And yet, you've done nothing to help address gun violence and get dangerous weapons out of the hands of dangerous people. Florida, after Parkland, after you made promises that you had no intentions on keeping to the parents of Parkland, Florida passed legislation raising the age to have an assault weapon, pass red flag laws that we've seen 7,000 plus instances where they've been used now. Our primary responsibility is the safety of Floridians. And Senator, 24 years in elected office, and you have not yet risen to that occasion. And then when asked about it, you say something that makes no sense.
That is strong and correct there, pointing to these vague reasons for not wanting to take action. And again, a lot of times it's, hey, this law wouldn't solve every single instance of gun violence, is so dishonest, and it bothers me a lot. Another moment here from Val Demings that I loved.
This is about taking dangerous guns out of the hands of dangerous people. And the overwhelming majority of people in our nation want us to do just that. How long will you watch people being gunned down in first grade, fourth grade, high school, college, church, synagogue, a grocery store, a movie theater, a mall, and a nightclub,
Congresswoman,
and do nothing? This is about...
That's what we're seeing. And as she noted at the very beginning of that statement, most people in our country, there's 80+% for universal background checks support in our country, and yet for some reason we haven't gotten them. That is the sign of a broken system, or at least not good representatives in those positions of power. If you can look out in the country and choose whatever it is, your campaign contributions, your weird, distorted view of the Second Amendment, or trying to make a certain part of your base happy, and value that over human lives, is crazy. Next moment, it's short, but she does talk about how, listen, he's over there talking about pharmaceutical companies, pharmaceutical costs. He's standing in the way of action on that actually would have helped to reduce those costs, the Inflation Reduction Act.
He talked about pharmaceuticals. He voted against legislation that would help reduce the cost of prescription drugs and help cap the cost of insulin.
Yes, and as we covered on the show, specifically they did get in the Inflation Reduction Act a cap on insulin costs for Medicare recipients, but not for private insured people, because Republicans specifically stood in the way of that happening based on the process of budget reconciliation. They were able to get the part for Medicare, but not for everyone else, specifically because of the Republican Party, and that needs to be called out. Next, a very strange point made by Marco Rubio about drop boxes that you use to drop your ballots off during an election.
That's a method of voting that doesn't advantage one group or another. There's danger involved in drop boxes. People need to think about it. Okay, imagine if someone decides, oh, there's a drop box, I'm just going to put some explosive in it and blow it up and burn all of those ballots, and now those votes don't count at all. Okay, there is something, with elections, there are two things that are very important. Number one, the count has to be accurate. The votes have to be counted accurately. But the other is there has to be public confidence. The public has to believe that the elections were fair. That's a method.
So two big points there. Let's start with his second one, which is people need to believe in the election. I agree with you, but I also think that just because you and your party have convinced people not to believe in the election doesn't mean there's actually a problem with it. And so we've heard the lies being spread about the last election. Naturally, a bunch of people within your movement are going to think it wasn't free and fair, but it was. So we don't need to solve a problem that isn't there just because you convince people that it was there wrongly. But then to the first point, making up bizarre hypotheticals about what could happen with a drop box is not a way to correctly argue against them. What I've always said about voting is I say increase the access and ease in which people can vote up until it would cause problems with the safety, legitimacy of the process. And as we've seen with every independent organization and entity that's looked into our election processes, they're very secure right now. So if we can make it easier, if people can vote by mail, if people can vote early, if they can vote by drop boxes, and it's still staying secure, then we're good to go. Why make it harder for people to vote for no conceivable reason? Again, to solve a problem that isn't actually there. Then they move to the topic of abortions, or abortion rights, I should say, and the moderator asks Marco Rubio about, do you support exceptions in any scenario? And an odd little kind of back and forth ensues.
Senator, before we go,
Yeah.
I want to get back to the original question because I understand that you said you have supported legislation that has exceptions and that this particular bill that Lindsey Graham has drafted, you signed on to, does have that up to 4 months. But I asked you a specific question. That is, if you get the chance in another 6-year term to vote for a federal abortion ban with no exceptions, would you vote yes if it would make it the law?
No, listen, I've already told people what I don't believe that the value of a human life is determined by the circumstances
Right,
under which
I gave
created.
that
But the law that can pass in this country, I'm interested in saving human lives. And that's why every law that's out there has exceptions, including the one that she's attacking me on has exceptions. Every law I've ever passed has exceptions. We're never going to get a vote on a law that doesn't have exceptions because that's where the majority of the American people are. And I respect and understand that. And that's what I support. But she's still, you haven't asked her, no one here's asked her, she still won't answer what specific limits. She's never voted for a limit, not after 4 months, not after 5 months. And by the way, on the issue of
so this is an interesting thing he does. The question is, do you believe, and if you could get past, would you support something that has no exceptions at all? And he goes, well, that's not going to be passed. So, but that's not the question. We're asking you, do you believe and would you support this particular thing? And so he has said that the circumstances, as he highlighted there, of the pregnancy doesn't determine in his mind whether or not people should have the ability to get abortions. So what he's saying is, no, there shouldn't be any exceptions, but I know the political reality would never allow that to happen, so I'll support something a little bit more in the direction of, I don't even want to say moderation, because even making exceptions when you're banning it generally is not moderate in my mind. But then he does something that just so often is used by Republicans. But don't talk about my radical stance. They have a radical stance because they've never talked about the restrictions that they want. But every single Democrat, at least that I'm aware of, has said, let's draw the line where Roe v. Wade drew it, okay? Viability. And that is the most reasonable stance you could possibly have. So painting that to be radical is bonkers. Next moment, still on the topic of abortion from Val Demings.
Now, as a police detective who investigated cases of rape and incest, no, Senator, I don't think it's okay for a 10-year-old girl to be raped and have to carry the seed of her rapist. No, I don't think it's okay for you to make decisions for women and girls. As a senator, I think those decisions are made between the woman, her family, her doctor, and her faith.
There we go. Again, quite reasonable. And then final moment we're going to take a look at. Funny little kind of one-liner. She had a lot of good kind of soundbite moments, and this is saying that all he does, the only thing he's ever run in his life is his mouth. Nice.
Today, we can't do that kind of crazy stuff. It only adds to the inflation. I think it begins by winning this election and getting people like that out of office.
And that's time. Congresswoman, the same question you may answer, but you have 60 seconds to answer this question.
Thank you so much for that. Of course, the senator who has never run anything at all but his mouth would know nothing about helping people and being there for people when they are in trouble. No one planned the pandemic, but our response to it is everything. Individuals were hurting, families were hurting, businesses were hurting. We passed the CARES Act, which the senator supported. There were some problems in the CARES Act with the Paycheck Protection Program that you love to take credit for. Some say it was poorly written. Some say it didn't help the people that it was supposed to, didn't save the jobs that it was supposed to. There was a way to fix the problems in the PPP through the American Rescue Plan and help people that were in trouble. But you played politics, Senator, and you did not do that. Your number one job as a United States Senator is to protect the health, safety, and well-being of the American people. You've been at it for 24 years.
And a good moment there to close on, talking about the response to the pandemic. Lots of hypocrisy and politics playing in those moments. And now in retrospect, making it out to be something that's not. And of course, as we discussed, the natural causes economically of that type of economic situation and downturn because of the pandemic being treated like an example of the Democrats went crazy on spending when any inflation that was caused by a lot of spending happened a lot from the packages that were passed under Trump and the package that was passed under Biden. And That was what had to be done in that moment. Did we overdo it? Maybe, possibly. But is it a partisan issue or an example of irresponsible Democratic policies? Not at all. Interesting stuff there from Val Demings and Marco Rubio.